The downpour came without warning, the way autumn storms often did in the industrial quarter. Marcus Webb pulled his collar higher and quickened his pace, boots splashing through puddles that reflected the dim orange glow of streetlights. His muscles ached from 10 hours of hauling steel beams at the construction site, and all he wanted was his tiny apartment, a hot shower, and whatever leftovers were waiting in his refrigerator. The streets were nearly deserted. Most people had the sense to stay indoors when the weather turned this ugly. Marcus was halfway down Faroe Street when he heard a sound that made him stop mid-stride. It was soft, almost swallowed by the rain, but unmistakable. Someone was crying. He stood there for a moment, water streaming down his face, listening. There it was again, coming from the narrow gap between the old textile factory and the abandoned apartment building. Every instinct told him to keep walking. This wasn't the safest neighborhood, and dark alleys at night were usually trouble waiting to happen. But Marcus had never been good at walking away from trouble, especially when it sounded like that small. Scared, desperate, he turned into the alley, his eyes adjusting to the deeper darkness. The smell of wet garbage and rust filled his nostrils. At first, he saw nothing but shadows and the hulking shape of an industrial dumpster. Then movement caught his eye. 2 small figures were huddled against the brick wall, partially hidden behind the dumpster. They were pressed so close together, they almost looked like one person. As Marcus took a careful step forward, he could see they were children, or at least they were child-sized. "Hey," he said softly, raising his empty hands where they could see them. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." They flinched at his voice, and in the weak light filtering from the street, Marcus got his first clear look at them. His breath caught in his throat. They weren't human. Their skin had a faint luminescence, like moonlight on water, with an undertone that shifted between silver and pale blue. Their eyes were larger than human eyes, with irises that seemed to contain tiny galaxies of shifting color. Delicate pointed ears curved slightly backward from their heads. Both wore what might have once been clothing, but was now just tattered rags, soaked through and clinging to their thin frames. The taller one, who looked about 12, wrapped her arms protectively around the smaller one, who couldn't have been more than 8 or 9. They were both shaking from cold, fear, or both. Marcus had heard about aliens, of course. Everyone had. They'd been coming to Earth for about 15 years now, ever since the first contact. Most people in the city had seen at least a few, but these children looked nothing like the confident diplomats or traders who usually visited. They looked hunted. "You're freezing," Marcus said, more to himself than to them. He doubted they understood English anyway. Without overthinking it, he shrugged off his heavy work jacket and knelt down, moving slowly. He held it out to them. The smaller child whimpered and pressed her face against the older one's shoulder. The older girl stared at Marcus with those strange, beautiful eyes, clearly torn between fear and desperation. "Please," Marcus said quietly. "Just take it. You'll get sick out here." After what felt like an eternity, the older girl slowly reached out and took the jacket. Her fingers were ice cold when they brushed his hand. She wrapped it around both of them, and Marcus saw something shift in her expression, a tiny crack in the wall of fear. He sat back on his heels, rain soaking through his shirt now, and pulled out his lunch bag from his back pocket. He'd saved half his sandwich from the afternoon break. It wasn't much, just some ham and cheese on wheat bread, but it was food. He unwrapped it and held it out. This time, the smaller one moved first. Her hand darted out quick as lightning and snatched the sandwich. She didn't even look at it before shoving it into her mouth, chewing frantically. The older girl watched for a second, then took the piece her sister offered her. They ate like they were starving, which Marcus realized they probably were. His heart clenched in his chest. Whatever their story was, whatever had brought them to this alley in the rain, they were just scared kids who needed help. "Listen," he said, knowing they probably couldn't understand, but needing to say it anyway. You can't stay here. It's not safe. He gestured to himself, then to the street, then made a roof shape with his hands over his head. Home, warm food. Understand? They stared at him. The older girl said something in a language that sounded like wind chimes and flowing water. She pointed at herself, then her sister, then made a gesture Marcus didn't understand. I know you don't know me, Marcus said. I know you're scared, but I promise I won't hurt you. I just want to help. Maybe it was the tone of his voice. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was just that they had no other options. But after a long moment, the older girl slowly stood up, pulling her sister with her. They were both barefoot, their feet red and raw from the cold pavement. Marcus stood too, trying not to make any sudden movements. He pointed down the street. This way. Not far. They followed him, staying several feet behind, ready to bolt at any sign of danger. The walk to his apartment took 15 minutes, and with every step, Marcus wondered what the hell he was doing. He didn't know anything about aliens, didn't know if they could even eat human food safely, didn't know what kind of trouble they might be in or who might be looking for them. But when he glanced back and saw them limping along in the rain, two small figures wrapped in his jacket, he knew he couldn't do anything else. His apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building that had seen better days. The elevator was broken, as usual, so they climbed the stairs. By the time they reached his door, both girls were breathing hard, leaning on each other. Marcus unlocked the door and pushed it open, stepping aside to let them see inside. They hesitated on the threshold, water dripping onto the worn hallway carpet. It's okay, Marcus said gently. He walked in first and turned on the lights. The apartment was small, just one bedroom, a cramped kitchen, and a living room that barely fit a couch and a television. But it was warm and dry. The girls stepped inside carefully, like they were entering a trap. They looked around with wide eyes, taking in everything: the faded curtains, the stack of books on the coffee table, the jacket hanging by the door. Marcus grabbed every blanket he could find and wrapped them around the two girls. They stood close together in the middle of his living room, dripping water and still shaking. He turned the heat up as high as it would go and started heating up a pot of soup he'd made a few days ago. While the soup warmed, he found some old towels and showed them how to dry off. They watched his demonstrations carefully, then mimicked his movements. The older girl helped the younger one, drying her hair with gentle movements that spoke of long practice. When the soup was ready, Marcus poured 2 bowls and set them on the small kitchen table. He sat down and gestured for them to join him. They approached like nervous animals, but hunger won over caution. The moment they tasted the soup, they devoured it, barely stopping to breathe. Marcus watched them eat and felt something shift in his chest. He'd lived alone for 3 years, ever since he'd moved to the city for work. His life had been simple, predictable, and more than a little lonely. Now, in the space of an hour, everything had changed. When they finished eating, the smaller girl's eyes were already drooping. The older one looked exhausted too, but she kept watching Marcus, as if waiting for the trap to spring. You can take the bed, Marcus said, pointing to his bedroom. I'll sleep on the couch. They didn't move. Marcus stood slowly and walked to the bedroom, pulling back the covers. He patted the mattress, then pointed to them, then to the bed. Understanding dawned in the older girl's eyes. She said something to her sister, and they both stood. They walked into the bedroom together, never separating, and climbed onto the bed fully clothed, still wrapped in blankets. The older girl positioned herself between Marcus and her sister, protective even now. Good night, Marcus said softly, and turned off the light. He settled onto the couch, which was too short for his frame, and stared at the ceiling. Rain pattered against the windows. From the bedroom, He could hear quiet breathing gradually evening out into sleep. Marcus didn't know their names. He didn't know where they'd come from or why they'd been alone in that alley. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring or if he was making a huge mistake. But as he finally drifted off to sleep, one thought crystallized in his mind with perfect clarity. Whatever happened next, he wasn't going to let anyone hurt them. They'd stumbled into his life in the rain, two scared children with nowhere else to go. And somehow, in just a few hours, they'd become his responsibility, his to protect. The morning sun filtered through Marcus's thin curtains, creating patterns of light across the worn carpet. He woke with a stiff neck from the too small couch and the immediate memory of why he was there instead of in his bed. For a moment, he wondered if the previous night had been some fever dream, brought on by exhaustion and rain. Then he heard soft voices from the bedroom musical, lilting sounds that confirmed everything had been real. Marcus sat up slowly, running a hand through his disheveled hair. He needed to think clearly. He'd brought two alien children into his home, and now he had to figure out what came next. The logical thing would be to contact the authorities, let someone official handle this. But something about the fear in their eyes last night stopped him. They hadn't just been scared of the dark or the rain. They'd been scared of being found. He walked quietly to the bedroom doorway and peered in. The two girls were awake, sitting on the edge of the bed and speaking to each other in hushed tones. When they noticed him, they fell silent immediately, the older one moving protectively in front of her sister again. "Good morning," Marcus said with a gentle smile. He pointed to himself. "Marcus." He repeated it, tapping his chest. "Marcus." The older girl watched him carefully, then mimicked the gesture, touching her own chest. "Nira," she said softly. Then she placed her hand on her sister's shoulder. "Sola." "Nira and Sola," Marcus repeated, and was rewarded with the smallest hint of a smile from Nira. It transformed her face, making her look less haunted and more like the child she should be. He gestured toward the kitchen. "Food?" That word they seemed to understand. They followed him cautiously, Sola clutching Nira's hand. Marcus made scrambled eggs and toast, keeping his movements slow and visible. He set the plates on the table and sat down, eating his own food to show it was safe. The girls ate more slowly this morning, though still with the focused intensity of people who'd known real hunger. Marcus noticed Nira watching him between bites, studying him like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Over the next few days, they developed a careful routine. Marcus went to work each morning, though he spent every moment worried about what was happening back at the apartment. He'd leave food out for them and gesture that he'd return. And each evening he'd find them exactly where he'd left them, waiting. Slowly, painfully slowly. They began to trust him. Marcus started teaching them English, pointing to objects and speaking the words clearly. Nira picked it up with remarkable speed, her intelligence obvious in the way she'd practice words under her breath, testing them out. Sola was younger and more playful, turning their lessons into games that made Marcus laugh despite himself. "Chair," Marcus would say. "High chair," Nira would repeat carefully. "Chair." Sola would shout, jumping on it, and Nira would smile a real, full smile that made something warm bloom in Marcus's chest. 3 weeks into their strange new life together, Marcus came home to find Mrs. Haverton, his landlady, standing in the hallway outside his door. She was a rail-thin woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Webb," she said, her voice crisp, "I've been hearing voices from your apartment. Children's voices." Marcus's heart hammered, but he kept his expression neutral. "Just the television, Mrs. Haverton. I've been watching some shows with kids in them." She pursed her lips. "The television. At all hours. I work long shifts. Helps me relax." She stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus had the uncomfortable feeling she knew he was lying. But finally, she nodded curtly. See that the volume stays reasonable. She turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the stairs. Marcus waited until she was gone before entering his apartment. He found Nira and Sola pressed against the far wall, eyes wide. They'd heard everything. It's okay, Marcus said quickly. She's gone. But we need to be more careful. You have to be quiet during the day, understand? Quiet. He pressed a finger to his lips. Nira nodded solemnly. She understood more than just the words. She understood they were hiding. That night, after Sola had fallen asleep, Nira stayed up. Marcus was reading on the couch when she approached him, her luminescent skin glowing softly in the lamplight. She was taller now than when he'd found her, and he realized with a start that she must be aging differently than human children. Marcus, she said, her English now quite good despite the musical accent. Why you help us? It was the first real question she'd asked him. Marcus set down his book and thought about how to answer. Because you needed help, he said simply. And because it was the right thing to do. Many people see us in alley before. No one stop. Her eyes were serious, ancient beyond her years. Only you. Then they were fools, Marcus said quietly. Nira sat down beside him, maintaining a careful distance. On my world, we say, when someone save your life, they own piece of your soul. Forever connected. You don't owe me anything, Nira. Not owe. Connected. She touched her chest and pointed at him. Like ... family? Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. Yeah, like family. 3 months had passed when everything changed. Marcus was walking home from work when he noticed the black sedan parked across from his building. It was too clean, too new for this neighborhood. 2 men sat inside, one of them watching the building entrance through binoculars. Marcus's blood ran cold. He ducked into a corner store and watched through the window. The men weren't moving, just watching. Waiting. He bought a newspaper he didn't need and used it to shield his face as he approached his building from a different direction. His mind raced. How had they been found? Had Mrs. Haverton reported something? Had someone seen the girls through a window? He took the back stairs 3 at a time, trying not to panic. When he burst through his apartment door, Nira was already standing, Sola behind her. They'd sensed something was wrong. We have to go, Marcus said, grabbing a bag and throwing clothes into it. Now, there are men watching the building. Nira's face went pale, her skin losing some of its luminescence. Government? She whispered. I don't know, maybe. Does it matter? She shook her head. They take us. Never see you again. They ... experiment. Study. We are not people to them. We are things. The fear in her voice decided him. Then we run. I have a sister upstate. We can go there, figure out what to do. They moved quickly, grabbing only essentials. Marcus had some cash saved enough to get them out of the city if they were careful. He led them down the back stairs and out through the basement, emerging in the alley behind the building. They made it 3 blocks before Marcus saw another sedan, this one circling the block slowly. He pulled the girls into a doorway, his heart pounding. How many? Nira asked quietly. I don't know. Enough. They spent that night hiding in an abandoned warehouse, huddled together in the cold. Sola cried quietly, and Nira held her, whispering in their native language. Marcus kept watch at a grimy window, seeing the sweep of headlights pass by every hour. As dawn broke, Marcus made a decision. My sister Janice lives about 200 miles from here. She has a farmhouse, lots of land. We'll be safer there. Your sister will accept us? Nira asked. Marcus thought of Janice, who'd always been the kindest person he knew. Yes, she will. They made their way to the bus station, Marcus keeping the girls hidden under oversized hoodies. He bought 3 tickets with cash, and they boarded a bus heading north just as the morning commute began. On the bus, Sola fell asleep with her head on Nira's shoulder. Nira stayed awake, staring out the window at the passing landscape. After an hour, she spoke quietly. "We are from planet called Disha. Far away. Many, many stars away." Marcus had been waiting for this, hoping she'd tell him when she was ready. "What happened? How did you end up here?" "Our parents. They were scholars. Studying Earth. They brought us. Then ... Her voice caught. "There was attack. Ship destroyed. We escaped in small pod. Crashed. Parents." She couldn't finish. Marcus reached over and gently took her hand. It was the first time he'd touched either of them beyond handing them things. Nira's fingers were cool and delicate, and they squeezed his tightly. "My world think we dead," she continued. "No one looking for us. We were alone. So afraid. Then you found us." "I'm sorry," Marcus said. "I'm so sorry for what you lost." "You gave us new life," Nira said, turning to look at him. "You gave us hope when we had none. You are good man, Marcus Webb. Best I ever know." Something passed between them in that moment. A recognition, a deepening of the bond they'd been forming. Marcus realized with a start that Nira wasn't quite the child he'd found 3 months ago. Her species aged differently, and the girl beside him now looked closer to 15 or 16, with an intelligence and awareness that went far beyond human years. They arrived at Janice's farmhouse by evening. She was a sturdy woman in her 40s, with laugh lines around her eyes and her brother's same kind expression. When Marcus explained the situation, most of it, anyway, she didn't hesitate. "They can stay as long as they need to," she said, ushering them inside. "Lord knows I have plenty of room." That night, as Nira and Sola slept in the guest room, Marcus stood on the porch with his sister, looking out at the dark fields. "You're in love with her," Janice said quietly. Marcus nearly choked. "What? No, she's a child. I'm just Marcus." Janice turned to look at him. "I saw the way you look at her, and the way she looks at you. I don't know how faster people grow up, but that girl in there isn't a child anymore. And you both know it." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. His sister was right. Somewhere in the past 3 months, something had shifted. Nira had been growing, changing, and he'd been too focused on keeping them safe to really notice. "It doesn't matter," he said finally. "She's not human. She's from another world. And right now, she just needs someone to protect her." "Maybe," Janice said. "But eventually, she's going to grow up completely. And then you're both going to have to figure out what you really mean to each other." Marcus didn't answer. He stared out at the stars, wondering which one was Desha, wondering if somewhere out there, people grieved for 2 girls they thought were dead. He wondered what would happen when those people found out the truth.